All right, so I want to talk about flexible dieting, kind of in general, and what I think flexible dieting is, why I started doing it, what the transition was like, and also I think that there are a lot of different ways to go about, or a lot of different ways to think about flexible dieting or balance intake. I know that people do it in different ways, but still use the same term. And I think it's important to know that there are different ways to do it and that none of them are necessarily bad, wrong, or better than the others, you know? So I guess I'll just start by the first time I really decided I was going to be a flexible dieter was when I was reverse dieting last year after my shows. So when I did shows, and even kind of in the off season, I was a clean eater who had cheat meals. So it was, and it wasn't restrictive, because like I think I've said before, I loved my coach, still love, he's great. But you know, I ate clean when I was prepping for shows. I don't know if it was like a mental thing or what, but I just ate clean. And let me just say, eating clean, right? So I don't believe that there are clean versus dirty foods. But you know, when I refer to clean eating, I mean like eating whole foods that aren't processed, essentially. That's what people mean, right? They eat, you know, potatoes, like sprouted grains, you know, things like they would not dare to eat an Oreo, right, as part of a meal because that's not a clean food and that would be more of like a cheat. That's what I mean when I say I ate clean. So I would save the treats and things like that for cheat meals, which I would have once or twice a week, and they were big, and you know, and it wasn't necessarily a binge, but I started to realize, I guess what happened when I was reverse dieting was I started to realize, so if I'm eating like cookies and, you know, pizza or something for a cheat meal, why can't, and you know, then I wake up the next day and I'm fine, you know, and nothing in my life has gone wrong. I've just had a cheat meal or kind of refed my muscles, right? Why can I not eat these on a daily basis? And I had seen that people did, you know, and and like I said, I wasn't feeling restricted. It was just kind of this like light bulb moment where I was like, I can do this every day and I don't have to wait for, you know, cheats on the weekend or whatever, you know, maybe I should try this out. And so slowly but surely, like I said, while I was reversing, which I think helped because I was already adding in food. So while I was reversing, I had a little bit higher numbers than I had in prep and stuff. I would throw in an Oreo before bed, right? And I started to realize I actually looked a lot better. Partially because, you know, it was post-show and I was filling back out and I didn't look so like depleted and stuff, right? But also, I felt better, you know, my energy was better. I didn't feel like I was living off the same foods and that sort of a thing. And I felt a lot better because I could not bring food with me everywhere. Or if I went to a restaurant, it was a lot easier, you know, things like that. And so I was into it immediately and have never left, right? So that's my experience with it. Like I said, it was slow at first. You know, I did it little by little, and for the most part, I still, even to this day, most of my meals are still like a protein source, a carb source, and a vegetable. You know, like they're pretty balanced and not a lot of processed foods, but like I am not shy about having a Quest bar on the go. You know what I mean? You know, whatever it is that you want to have, right? But the whole point is that even though I'm still eating those healthy, you know, what people consider clean foods, I shouldn't say healthy because they are healthy, right? But I mean clean foods, what people consider clean. I do that the most, but I also very much don't restrict myself. So I think that the word balance, or the idea of being a flexible dieter is not a rigid definition, and I love that about it because it just opens it up for more people to be able to utilize it. But I think that it is important to know that there's not only one way to go about it. So what I do, first off, is I have macros. Macronutrients are carbohydrate, protein, fat. Some people consider fiber one of them. So I have a set number of macronutrients to hit every day. They're different day to day based on what I'm training. But I do have, a set, whatever that may be, day to day. They're not rigid. And by that I mean I'm not in prep. I'm already at a place with my body fat level, etc., where I pretty much am just trying to maintain where I'm at right now. And so if I go under or over, one day because of whatever fact, I'm busy, I'm out, I didn't get enough food in, or I got more than I anticipated, whatever, not a big deal for me right now. So like I said, they're not rigid. I don't restrict myself. If I'm really hungry at the end of the day, I'm pretty much out of macros. I'm not going to starve myself, right? Because I don't need to. But for the most part, I try and kind of stay within those ranges because that's what works for me. I also, though, some days, like for example, last week when we were in Connecticut for Thanksgiving, meeting John's family, most of those days I just ate intuitively. And intuitive eating for me essentially means you are aware and mindful of what you're taking in, and you eat things in moderation with control. So being under control is really hard, and I was not always able to do this. For example, when I was in my off seasons, when I was competing, I would not have been able to eat intuitively, just because I would always have rounded up. I would have always, which, like I said, isn't like the end of the world, but I would have overeaten quite a bit because that's just the mindset I was in at that point. I wasn't a flexible dieter yet. But I can do that now. I have a few clients who are learning to do that, which is really exciting because it's hard. It's like really hard. Eating intuitively sounds like it should be natural, and it's really not. It's really not. But anyway, so I'm kind of a mix between counting macros and eating intuitively. I would say I tend more towards counting macros, but that's also because I'm so familiar with how, like, the macronutrient breakdown of a lot of different foods, right? Because I've been doing this for a long time. So I'm probably more towards that side, but like I said, I can eat intuitively pretty easily. So, but there are a few other ways to go about balanced intake or flexible dieting. One of which being not having any numbers at all, but eating intuitively. So this is like one end of the spectrum that I'm on, right? I am not there because now that I've set those numbers, they're kind of always in my head, right? But like some people don't care about numbers at all, and they're pretty good about just eating a balanced diet, with mostly, healthy foods, throwing in a few processed things that they feel good once in a while, ordering the eggnog latte or whatever, but, being mindful about what they eat the rest of the day because of that, like things like that. People can eat intuitively. Like I said, it's not easy, but some people do that with no numbers at all, and they are perfectly fine. That's one way to go about having a balanced diet, and it's awesome if you can do it. It's not always the most ideal for having aesthetic goals, especially if they're really specific aesthetic goals, like getting to the stage. But like I said, things work differently for everyone. So another way is to eat clean. This is another non-tracking way. So you essentially eat clean. That's the mindset that you're in, clean, right? But you eat non-processed foods and things like that the majority of the time. But then you also have untracked meals. So it's not like untracked things throughout the day. It's not quite like intuitive eating, but this is essentially eating clean and having cheat meals or treat meals. But you're still not counting. So there's kind of a fuzzy line between those two. I think of intuitive eating being different from this because intuitive eating, you're not really having cheat meals. You're just every single day you're eating mindfully and you're throwing in treats here and there. This other way I think of it is more of like a clean eating protocol, but because they're not counting, it's more of like a flexible dieting. It is kind of a blurry line. But I know someone personally who does this, and they essentially just try their best to, be healthy with the majority of their meals, and then like three days a week or something, they'll have a cheat meal, and it's totally untracked, just like the rest of their food is untracked, but they don't stress about that either. This is pretty similar to what, I mean, this is, other than the fact that I tracked, this is essentially what I did while I was in prep and off season. I mean, in prep I would have like one cheat meal a week, and in off season I would have two or three. I think it was supposed to be more like two. But that's what I did, but I also counted. So this is just the kind of the non-counting version, and that's how people think of it as being balanced. And then of course, you can, you know, track everything, but eat flexibly, right? So you eat whatever fits your macros, but you do try and hit those numbers, you know, every single day. Which, like I said, is more what I lean towards, but I'm not quite there because I just don't track that rigidly all the time anymore. I definitely used to. And like when I'm, for example, when I'm reverse dieting and you have to like incrementally increase your food, I track a little more rigidly, but I'm not doing any of that right now. And when I'm just maintaining, you know, I'm not that rigid. Some people all the time are very strict about their macros, but they're also really good about not restricting food groups at all. They eat whatever fits their macros. Like if it fits, they eat it, right? If it fits your macros. But that's another way to go about it. One of the best phrases I've heard about this is like binge on an entire packet of Oreos and no one bats an eye, but make it fit your macros and everyone loses their mind. And it's like really true though, right? Like, and that was kind of what I meant by like my, you know, eye-opening or light bulb moment was I was like, why is it okay to eat these things in excess for a cheat meal? But if I want to have like one or two, like a different day, like that's a weird thing. I started to realize like, you know what, that doesn't make any sense. And I've studied a lot of nutrition and that just doesn't make any sense, right? But people, even if, like, for example, I took a lot of nutrition classes in college because I was a health and human physiology major, and I took most of my electives for nutrition because that's what I was interested in. But they don't teach you about flexible dieting. They don't. When they're talking to you about nutrition, they talk about, you know, what people consider clean foods. And it's kind of sad. Not sad. I mean, it's good to teach people to be healthy, but it's kind of sad that almost fosters a restrictive environment around people who are learning about nutrition, right? They're like, these are the good foods. I learned about these. I should eat these. This is what a balanced diet is. But there's nothing balanced about eating only a certain number of foods and then having a huge binge on foods that you tell yourself you can't eat otherwise. Like that's not balanced to me. And once I kind of started my thought process that way, I've never turned back because it doesn't make any sense to me to binge all out and then restrict and then binge all out and then restrict if you could just kind of mesh the two together and get the same results. So that's what I've done, and that's what works for me. It works for all of my clients. Like I said, I think me and, you know, for the most part, most people who are flexible dieters still like to eat, you know, plain healthy foods, you know, and it feels good, and you don't always want like a ton of sugar, you know, or, you know, put cheese on everything. I do put cheese on everything. But you know, most people want to eat healthy. That's what your body craves. But that does not mean that it's going to break down if you give it, you know, a Pop-Tart here and there or whatever. The only thing that I will say that's kind of not a downside, but it's something that people can get caught off guard about flexible dieting is that I think I had mentioned that like certain processed foods or, you know, foods that you don't have to prepare or whatever, they are high calorie for a very small surface area of food, which is the definition of a non-nutrient dense food. So essentially nutrient density is how many nutrients per like surface area of food there is. So for example, if you wanted to get 20 grams of carbs from broccoli, you would have to eat like a plate like huge, right? Because it's not very dense with carbs. If you wanted to get 20 grams of carbs from an Oreo, you'd have two Oreos, which are this big, right? So like, obviously not everyone wants to eat 20 grams of carbs worth of broccoli, but you see what I mean? It's a lot easier to eat more food if you're not constantly eating, you know, Oreos, Pop-Tarts, things like that, where they have a lot of calories, but like they're pretty small. They're a pretty small portion of food, right? So that's all I would caution about that, because when I first started doing this, I did run into those problems sometimes, and you get really excited when you find a macro gem. Might have seen people using that phrase. So essentially, when you find something that has like a lot of food for not a lot of macros, you're like pumped because you can eat a lot of it and still, eat something that might not be like a classic clean food or something. Like Arctic Zero, for example, the Arctic Zero ice cream, which people love because you can eat like an entire pint of that versus like a quarter of a pint of regular ice cream for the same macros. So that's essentially what that means, finding a macro gem or finding something that's like really macro friendly. So there is so much to talk about when it comes to counting macros and flexible dieting, and everyone's different ideas on it. But essentially that's just kind of an intro to like why I do it, what I think about it, what I think it means, the fact that there are like 3 or 4, real different ways to go about it. There are so many different things you can say about this, but essentially, I guess just to sum it up, I would say that it has for sure changed my life. Like, I have never felt mentally better than I do being mindful of, macronutrients and the amount that I should be eating, but also like being like, yeah, that does, rice doesn't sound good right now, so I'm gonna have this, cookie or whatever. I use cookies as an example a lot because I swear to God, they're like right there staring at me, like right there. But anyway, you know what I mean? There's a lot more to flexible dieting than like Oreos and Pop-Tarts. But those are just the examples that come to my head, I guess. These are the best ones by far. But anyway, this is what I like right here. Must have Oreos next to you at all times. No, seriously, in all seriousness though, if you have any other questions about flexible dieting, comment them and subscribe so that I can hopefully answer them in a future video. And I will be putting up more about flexible dieting, but also I'm going to do more for the holiday series next. So be looking out for that as it gets closer to Christmas. I'm like weirdly excited about the holidays this year because I live across the country now. So like all my family and friends are like in the Midwest or the East Coast, and I'm like on the West Coast. And so I'm like, oh my God, the holidays, I'm freaking out this year, which is fine because it's like a happy time, but I'm like I'll catch myself even being a little bit like crazy about it. But anyway, I hope you guys have a great rest of the week, and I will see you next time.